Nawaz Sharif was himself Prime Minister for the second time and was intent on destroying once and for all Benazir Bhutto and her husband Asif Ali Zardari.
So the government arrested Mr. Zardari on multiple charges, which included the murder of Benazir's brother.
The fact that I'm put into that case is done to malign our government. Who's lost the most in Mir Murtaza's murder? We.
Who brought the charges against Mr. Zardari? Everybody who held and wielded power during this period. When her government fell and Nawaz became a prime minister, there were these cells that he controlled that would bring these charges against Benazir and Asif, and she would go from court to court, and he would go from court to court.
They were in and out of Karachi jail. I mean, that was like a home away from home in a way at that time.
But what they didn't realize that I'm a fighter and she was a fighter and we'd fight to a last breath.
Yes, Mr. Zardari is a businessman. He does business. Other people do business. They're entitled to do business. But where is the law violated?
I don't know if you can plant something in the New York Times, but there was a very serious article on Benazir's millions in which Zardari was implicated.
The House of Graph pretty succinctly in 3 or 4 words summed up what I tried to say in 7,000 or 8,000 words, that there was corruption going on, bank statements in the name of Benazir Bhutto and her husband.
These stories were planted by the intelligence services in order to justify dismissal of elected government.
Even if they can't make the charges stick, surely your wife is finished politically.
That's what they thought the last time around.
People don't realize, you're being attacked from all sides. Her husband was in jail. She had 3 little children.
And this was political victimization.
They were putting pressure on the judge to take even her ancestral property, what she's inherited from her grandfather and her father.
I had to look after my children. I didn't know how they would be taken care of. My mother's suffering from Alzheimer's. She lives with me. So both for personal and political reason, I thought that my freedom of movement was essential to the success of both these lives.
My mother was obviously a very prominent person in my life. She was the only parent I had for 8 years.
When we moved to Dubai, my mum had to go for speeches and things a lot.
We would write letters.
I mean, we'd write her letters when we were kids and just put it under her door.
And assume that it was going to her.
So when she came back, she'd get all these letters.
Prime Minister Bhutto, welcome back to Harvard. Welcome for your inspiration as a woman of courage and conviction. And we look forward to learning of your inspiration and your experiences as the leader of Pakistan and your ongoing work in this regard. Welcome.
I worked very closely with Benazir in her years of opposition. We traveled around the world doing speeches, paid speeches. And there were 2 goals for the paid speeches. One was to get the message out, to keep her relevant. But the other reason was that she was a working woman and she was supporting her family. Asif was in jail, and some of the money that was set aside was for Bilwal's college education. This did not seem like a woman who had unlimited sources of money at all. I could assure you of that.
When I was elected Prime Minister for the second time in 1993, Pakistan was on the threshold of being declared a terrorist state. The first attack on the World Trade Towers had already taken place. My government understood the potential for the destabilization of the region.
In 1996, when the Taliban took over our neighboring Afghanistan, there were only 3 countries in the world that recognized it: the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan. And Benazir, as a supposedly democratic feminist prime minister, extended her country's recognition, support, and aid to the Taliban in Afghanistan.
It's terribly inaccurate and unfair to say that she was a supporter of the Taliban. She was some woman who wanted very much to contain the Taliban and thought that there could be a political solution that they had to be part of.
The truth is, Pakistan is a military state, and those kinds of issues are dealt with by an increasingly independent ISI.
The Pakistanis believed they needed these Islamist groups in order to prevent India from circling around and taking control of Afghanistan, their neighbor.
people of Pakistan celebrated the birth of the Islamic bomb.
Most Pakistanis believe that they deserve a nuclear weapon. And if for no other reason, they need a nuclear weapon because India has a nuclear weapon.
The military in Pakistan has complete control over security policy. Prime ministers, including Benazir Bhutto, Nawaz Sharif, they were mere visitors of nuclear facilities. They did not have control over it.
Whether a president or a dictator is in charge, the military is in charge of Pakistan.
Nawaz Sharif appointed General Musharraf Chief of Army Staff. So they worked together for about roughly, I would say, 10 months before General Musharraf deposed the elected government and became the ruler himself.
Having accused Nawaz Sharif of an assassination attempt, Musharraf used that pretense in order to take control of the Pakistani state. Pakistan, of course, has had a number of military coups in its brief history, and Musharraf's coup was very much in line with the previous coups.
I wish to inform you that the armed forces have moved in as a last resort to prevent any further destabilization.
I was in prison then when he took over, and the first day one heard his speech, one didn't think he was the right choice, so this was the solution to go.
Pakistan People's Party has been struggling to take military out of politics, and the fact that General Musharraf wears a uniform blurs the distinction between civilian and democratic rule.
In order to fight back against the political challenges that he was facing from Benazir Bhutto, Musharraf added an addendum to the constitution saying that a prime minister could only have 2 tenures. And of course, since both Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif had already been prime minister twice, that seemed to preclude the possibility of them becoming prime minister again.
But I think he's scared of me because I symbolize democracy, and he's scared of the people of Pakistan. He wants to keep in place an order that would deprive the people of Pakistan of opportunity for education, for health.
For 11 years of my childhood, my father wasn't with us, so it was my mother who primarily brought us up.
Every Friday we sort of had family day, but when it came to 7 o'clock, that was like family dinner time. So no matter what my mom was doing, you know, she could be having, you know, some president, some prime minister, whatever it was.
She'd be like,
I'm sorry, it's 7
family
o'clock.
time.
It's dinner time with my kids.
She did thank God for the time that she did spend in exile so that she did get to spend time with us. We spent much more time with her while in exile than we ever did as she was prime minister.
And since my dad was away in prison, we were not left alone at the time, but we stuck together because of that.
Obviously, when she was in exile and he was in prison, they didn't see each other for a very long time, and that was extremely difficult for her and for the kids.
We would still talk to him all the time. We would send him letters and embarrassing drawings that we would make for him, and we'd always call him on his birthday, or he would call us on our birthday.
You know, they grew up without a father. Nothing could bring that, nothing could give that back to them. That was taken away from them for political reasons, for no other reasons. She would tell me how lonely she was and how difficult it was to live out of a suitcase and how difficult it was to be away from the children for months and months at a time. And she said, but that's the nature of my life. And, you know, sometimes she would cry. And, you know, she would never cry in public. No one ever saw it. No one ever saw it.
She would still make sure that we knew that he's going to come back here. He will come back. We're going to be fine. We're all together. She'd always remind us of that.
This is what this family sacrificed for Pakistan, for democracy.
We had a period of rotating so-called democratic governments, which were deeply cynical, and that raised some pretty fundamental questions about the state of Pakistan itself. By virtually every index, social, economic index, Pakistan has made absolutely woeful progress.
Who's helping Pakistan manage in that area? Nobody.
You can't have a functioning democracy in a country where people cannot read and write.
You can always gauge the political situation in Pakistan by the number of madrasas that exist in the villages and the rural areas.
The government relinquished its responsibility in providing education, health, housing, and social services to our people. And parents who were desperate to house their children, feed them and clothe them, handed them over to the political madrasas. The political madrasas did house, clothe, and feed the children, but they also provided the poison of hatred.
Half the population of 175 million is below the age of 18. This is the biggest recruitment pool for the militants.
The Pakistani intelligence service would funnel volunteers into Osama's camps and use his facilities. That he was essentially a contractor for training camps that the intelligence service wanted to set up in Afghan territory in order to train fighters to go into Kashmir. Osama bin Laden was able to operate with impunity.
Benazir knew exactly that the elements of the Mujahideen that we had empowered were Western haters, and their concept of jihad was going to expand beyond Afghanistan, and we were next on the list.
Once September 11th had happened, and given Pakistan's particular relationship with the Taliban and with al-Qaeda, it was really important to get Pakistan reoriented. It was Rich Armitage, the Deputy Secretary of State, who really had to go and convince the Pakistanis that they had to make a strategic shift.
Musharraf made a very moving speech approximately 10 days after the planes hit the towers, which he practically wept, and he said, "We have no choice. We must be partners to the United States in this."
There certainly is a disappointment and disenchantment with the United States, but it has not come out of nowhere. Its correction means doing justice.
The Bush administration totally misjudged the political situation in Pakistan. Musharraf really basically sold George Bush 43 a bill of goods. Musharraf convinced President Bush that he was the only thing standing in the way of a nuclear-armed Ayatollah taking over Pakistan. And that was never the case.
I remember being in Pakistan soon after 9/11 and talking to quite senior people in the country. They said, "This is our Christmas." I said, "What?" They said, "The Americans are friends again with us. Money is flowing. All the restrictions and sanctions of ours. We can build strength again." And they then collaborated. But the problem for them now was that some of the people they recruited to fight these wars against the Russians were genuine. I mean, they may be slightly nutty, but they did believe in it. So now to say to these people, you have to completely turn around, and our new enemy is Islam and the Islamic terrorists and the war on terror, wasn't an easy thing to pull off.
We are being blamed. We are being blamed for terrorism as being the source and cause of terrorism. We are not the source, we are not the cause.
We're now talking about a state which has at least half a dozen nuclear weapons and no doubt is intent on producing more.
The Pakistani nuclear program was a national asset. This was the